Hello, welcome to Chapter 3 Podcast, the show for readers of science fiction, fantasy, and romance. This is Season 2, Episode 29. Today, we are thrilled to have romance author Olivia Dade joining us to talk about her latest book, Shipwrecked. Olivia, we're so excited to have you here.
I am delighted to be chatting with you and excited that you have a copy of my book. I also have a copy of my book, and that is my only book that is unpacked. I just moved 4 days ago. So please, I'm very sorry about the empty bookshelves. Please know that this is not normal.
No, I appreciate you fitting us into the schedule because moving is a lot.
I don't think I could have done it when I moved. I would be like, nah, I can't make it. I'm sorry.
Yeah. So we are big fans of your work, and you write these amazing, fun romances. We have a lot of things we want to talk about. Like, one thing that I think you are known for, which is incredible, is you write these body positive, fat positive romances with plus size characters. And one thing that we wanted to ask about that I think is interesting is you do a range across even just the series of different kinds of body types, because like fat bodies don't come in one shape or size, and I think that is so cool. Also, they're not all just like traditionally gorgeous looking, and we've talked a lot about this, that we love that you do this, and we'd love to hear more about kind of how you've approached that, maybe why you made some of those choices, anything you want to say about it.
I mean, I think that fat representation is important to me. It always has been. My first series that I wrote, which is now out of print, did have some fat female main characters, but not all, because body diversity was sort of what I was, at that time, what I wanted to portray. And then at some point around 2016, 2017, a major book came out with fat main characters that I thought was incredibly bad representation and harmful. And just out of spite, I decided every book from now on, like, there's going to be fat people. Because I'm like, you can't, if there's harmful rep out there, I wanted to be putting what I consider, I mean, everyone has different sort of ideas of what they consider good fat rep, but I wanted to make sure that there was fat rep out there that I would not consider harmful. And then within fatness, as you said, I mean, we're not a monolith. There are different body types and also different relationships with our own bodies, fat bodies. Yeah. So that you're going to have some characters. I never want to write a character who is self-loathing because of their body size. That does not interest me. I feel like that's a story that's been told many times before, that the self-loathing character who learns to love their body as it is with the help of their significant other. It's just not, I think in the history of romance, the few books that we did see with fat female main characters, that was overwhelmingly the primary story that was being told again and again. And at some point, it makes it seem like, of course you're self-loathing if you're fat. And that the means by which you would overcome that is by the love of, I mean, let's face it, a good man, because it was, FM for the most part. So I'm interested in telling that story. But I do have some characters who, April, in spoiler alert, has some insecurities, and her sort of relationship with her body is one where she's had to overcome. She starts the book loving herself and loving her body. Her struggle is not that. Sort of her growth is learning how to put boundaries between herself and people she loves who are hurting her, especially over issues of fatness. But she has some insecurities still lingering. But she does love herself and her body. For Lauren, from All the Feels, she is generally someone who sort of tried to make herself small. Not necessarily in a physical sense, although in a scene set on an airplane, she also tries to do that physically. But not to take up much space in the world as far as demanding things for herself. And part of that has to do with how the world treats fat people,
Mhm.
but she doesn't loathe herself. And she doesn't loathe her body. She's relatively body neutral, I would say.
Mhm.
And then we have Maria from Shipwrecked, where if you've read it, you know that Maria is like 1,000% confident about her body in almost all areas of her life. She has vulnerabilities, but her vulnerabilities have zero to do with her body or her appearance. Like
Yeah.
you mind salty language?
No, it's fine.
Yeah, you can.
Zero fucks what
Yeah.
anyone else
Yeah.
thinks about her
No, she
body.
does.
Yeah.
I mean, and that was very deliberate on my part because I wanted to show that there's a panoply of different body types and relationships with our bodies. So Lauren is short and like apple shaped, and even if she lost weight, would not be considered conventionally attractive. April was more what you often see in romance, who's someone who probably would be considered conventionally attractive if she were thinner, with more of an hourglass shape. And then I sort of saw Maria as more like a rectangle, like really beautiful, but not like small waist or anything, just like a statuesque, like solid, beautiful, super confident fat woman. And yeah, so you're right. I mean, that is important to me. Also, body normalization is important to me. So I have a book, 40 Love, where Tess gets her period during the book because I feel like, again, that's normalizing bodies. And in the case of Shipwreck, body hair. Like that, there's different, these are normal human bodies and they look different and they do different things. And there's nothing unromantic or unsexy about it.
Yeah.
It's accurate. I mean, this is basically the conversation we were having.
This is like the whole conversation we had
when we were coming up with our questions. So it's just about like how much we love that representation and seeing it. I know for me, it's been just really refreshing when I read your books to read characters of varying like sizes as like a small fat person, and like it gives me like better grasp on just the various types of feelings we all have. Also, if that makes sense, because like obviously we all feel differently about our bodies. And especially like the way in which society treats us, like as your body changes and shifts as you age. Cause like I've definitely gained weight as I aged, and like it's a thing, it's fine. But like, you know, sometimes you're reading things, you're just like, oh wow, this isn't like, it's not bad that I have cellulite or whatever thing, and just feels so refreshing. On the plus size spectrum of characters, what inspired you with Peter to make a plus size hero? Because I was over the moon, because I do not. I'm the weirdo. I don't like skinny boys. I am a big boy girl. I don't like the you know, overly twiggy boys in romances. Sometimes I'm like, no, I have no interest. If I don't feel like you can throw my 200+ pound body, I don't want it.
I mean,
I just love Peter.
No, I love Peter too, and and that's something that I'm going to continue to do. You know, at least every couple or every 3 books, to have a larger male main character too. I mean, I think there have been conversations within Romancelandia about how, even though we still have a long way to go as far as showing diverse bodies for female main characters, that male main characters actually there's much less body diversity. Like they're almost all ripped. I mean, very fit, handsome, ripped. And with some exceptions, which I could name, but there's actually further to go in that. And there are male readers of romance. Of course, there's male writers of romance. But also in general, I think that it's important to show body diversity, that different types of male bodies are desirable as well. Yeah. I also harken back to a conversation that I had years ago do you remember Corey Alexander by any chance, who wrote as Zan West? They wrote as Zan West.
Yeah.
And issues of fatness and fat representation were super important to them. And I remember having a conversation on Twitter with them about this, because for me, when I looked at fat representation, I was sort of thinking about, for men, I was thinking about TV, where you often have like larger men who are sort of like schlubby, larger men who are with conventionally super hot women, like particularly on sitcoms and things like that.
Yeah.
And when you see larger women on TV, they're almost always paired with larger men or men who are not considered as conventionally hot. So for me, it felt transgressive in a good way to show a fat woman with conventionally attractive man. But as Corey pointed out very rightfully, number one, that's not necessarily what's happening in romance and books. It's actually not that at all. But also that when it's always a fat woman paired with a conventionally attractive man, it's as if his approval of her basically is the proof that she can still be attractive and fat. That like it's like the stamp of approval by a skinny person is what's needed. And that there is something really beautiful and important about having two fat characters who don't need the approval of anyone else who is thin or, considered conventionally fit or whatever, that they can desire and love each other without any reference to what thin people might think about them or their bodies. And I have remembered that conversation for a long time. Unfortunately, we lost Corey a couple of years ago. But it changed my thinking on that topic, and I wanted to sort of incorporate that. So
I appreciate that. I mean, because I think I see value in both of those representations. And so I think seeing all of it is great. I think one thing that we were talking about as well with your books, with your heroes, but really with all of your characters, but specifically with the heroes, is they don't feel like sort of fantasy stereotypes. They all are different from each other, and they feel like real people, which I love. I love that you feel like they like it feels less like it's sort of some. I don't know. Sometimes you read romances and it's like the guy is sort of the stand-in for like a specific set of traits and tropes more so than like a fully fleshed out person. And that is not something that we've seen, I think, in your books. And so I'd love to hear some about how you approach writing your heroes, your inspiration for these very different sorts of men.
I think I don't have a ton of interest in writing sort of a conventional uber, like stereotypically manly. I wouldn't even know, honestly, I wouldn't know how to go about writing like a super alpha, like alpha hole. I mean, I the beginning of this is kind of cranky, but that's as far as I can get. And in fact, this was my sort of sad attempt at enemies to lovers, and it lasts like 3 chapters. I'm not good at that. My friends to lovers is sort of my jam, or things like that. I'm just not as good at it. I wouldn't even know how to go about writing it. In fact, one thing, this is somewhat off topic, but one thing I thought was hilarious is years ago, and this book is not published, but I wrote a book of futuristic Gothic, and I had a villain, right? And a male villain. And so on one of those, occasionally people post quotes from their stories in progress on Twitter. And I posted a quote from my male villain, which I thought was sort of a great example of how evil he was and irredeemable. And people are like, he sounds hot. It's the hero. I'm like, no, it's not the hero. So the only time I have made a believably alpha hole-esque hero, at least for the space of one sentence, he was meant to be the villain. And it's also to me not to feed into toxic masculinity, or to feed into gender essentialism. That if you are a man, you're like this. If you're a woman, you're like this. I mean, I don't think most people are. I think most people are more complex than that. And I also don't want to write male main characters who don't have a full range of human emotions, right? That it's not just like possessiveness and anger and I love protective male main characters. That's one of my caretaker protective male main characters is one of my is catnip for me reading and writing. But I'm just not. I want to show the full range of human emotion and human experience in my male main characters. And they have to have some sort of character arc. There has to be something in there that changes over the course of the book that leaves them in a better position at the end and more able to sort of love and have a happy ending at the end, or else the story isn't as rich if there's no change. And so, yeah, you put all these things together. I'm glad that they seem like real people. I will say, if you want to see the full range of human emotions, that there's a reason All the Feels is called All the Feels, and it's because Alex is completely unafraid of any and all emotion, like sadness, anger, joy, any of it. He feels it 1,000%, and that was part of the joy of writing him.
I can see that so much. I feel like all your heroes like have gone to therapy almost because they actually express emotions. And they've like started to escape the toxic masculinity.
I love it. I mean,
mindset.
all of this explains so much of why I think your books really work for me, is because I am not the biggest fan either of the sort of alpha heroes. And so I'm always like, oh, I love the hero so much in these books.
I mean, I know there are people who would, there are books out there for everyone.
Yeah.
And I hope the people who love sort of the alphas and alpha holes, like, you know, the books are out there, and I hope that they, you know, find them and love them, but they're probably not necessarily going to love my books. So,
I mean, I like an alpha hole sometimes, so I love your books. Like, but I have to be in the mood. There's a very specific mood in which I'm like, yes, let's go on this journey.
Love it. Is he?
Yep. I was like, wait, am I?
Yeah.
We talked for so long, I forgot. We wanted to know a little bit about your journey as a romance reader, because I always think it's interesting to hear where romance writers got started reading romance. Whether, you know, that was the illicit, like sneaking your mom's bodice surfers or finding them later in life.
I literally began reading romances before I can remember. My mom pile inside their closet, my parents' closet off to the left, and I was told not to read those. So whenever I was left unsupervised, I dove headfirst into the pile of books. And I'm 45, so this was the early 80s. So I was like 6 or 7 when I started, because I was a good reader from a pretty early age. So I was reading things that, you know, I could technically read things for adults. I didn't understand everything that I was reading, especially since we're talking like early 80s, like dubious consent at best, like at best, a lot of it. And I didn't understand, frankly, a lot of the sex scenes, but I found them very, you know, entertaining, but also I think that I was just really hungry to read books where there was a happy ending guaranteed. Like, you know, I lived in a pretty fraught household in a lot of ways, and I think I really need to hear that, like, loving relationships that would last forever and end happily, that was something that was possible and could happen. And it was a story that I need to be told to me many times over the years. It was a very comforting story to me.
No, that makes a lot of sense.
It does make sense.
Yeah. I think the other interesting thing, and going back to some of the things we've already sort of discussed, is wondering about the journey, because I feel like for all of us it usually is a journey, but towards body acceptance and towards like being able to create characters that are, you know, positive about their bodies, that have fat positivity to them, and like in various ways. But I think, I don't know, I think it's amazing to see all of the different pieces of that in different characters on page. But how has that been for you?
I mean, I think it's been a process. Part of the reason I haven't published the first series that came out was my final female main character, Mary, in the book, had a history of disordered eating. And her history of disordered eating was actually my history of disordered eating. But I had not fully, I don't think, grappled with all the implications and how I felt about myself and my past and my history. And I think there are things in that story that would be harmful to readers to read
Mhm.
now. And it would take some work to revisit that and make it into something that I would feel good about republishing. And at some point you have to decide where your energy is going to go. So I think that I am more thoughtful about it now than I was before, partially, talking through the issue with people within the community, but also just thinking through it on my own, and sort of very deliberately, instead of sort of just falling into writing characters who looked more like me, thinking about it at a time, what do I want to say? What in here would give the wrong, what in here could hurt vulnerable readers who are
Mhm.
struggling, many of them, not all of them, but many of them may be struggling with issues of self-esteem or body sense around the issue of fatness. I um I think that I just wrote an essay. I don't know if they're going to publish it, but for Scary Mommy, they asked me to write an essay about how parenting sort of impacted sort of body image and writing. And one of the things that what I wrote about was how it all sort of worked together, in the sense that when my child, who's now 12, was little and we were in the bath together, they began to sort of look at my body and wonder about things like my varicose veins or my moles or just different parts of me. And they were just curious. They were just like, well, what's that? And one of the things I swore to myself when I had a kid was that I was not going to put myself down in front of my child, that I was not going to sort of pass on a legacy of hating my body and doing it in a way that my child could hear and then sort of internalize that. I was not going to do that. So I had to come up with kind ways to talk about my own body because I was in that bath with my child. So this is in the essay, but like, she saw my varicose veins, which would normally be something would be considered a flaw or ugly or whatever. They're big. Like, and I said, that's a blueberry river. And we pretended to like slurp up the blueberry river. And my moles, like I have, freckle mole type things. We said there was a chocolate chips and we pretended to eat those. And like, it was sort of the first time I was forced, this is before I started writing, forced to describe my body in ways that I had to be super careful about not harming the person who was hearing it, even though, at the time they were very young. Writing, once I started really thinking through my writing, maybe the past 4 years, was very much the same process. Like, working through how to describe bodies accurately without trying to sort of skip over or elide the fact that they're fat. Like the reality of having a fat body, but having that be at worst neutral, but at best something that can be loved and desired, not because you pretend that the fatness isn't there, but that, and not because the person is fat, but just because it's theirs, it's their body, it's loved and desired. And then to speak kindly about fat bodies was for me transformative. Some of the sort of gross shit from like fat phobia in our society, that was still sort of rolling around in my head somewhere. First, as I started trying to be kind about my own body in front of my child, and then as I started to write about people with bodies like mine kindly, at some point it sort of displaces some of that ugliness. Like, if I truly believe that people with my body type can be beautiful and loved and desired, if I believe that, and I do, then how can that not apply to me as well? And like, it's been transformative for me. So I think I've evolved too as I've done it, to sort of see how that works. It's hopefully has, for some readers at least, has some impact on them, but they should know that it's not just them, it's me too, as I'm writing that. I'm not one for affirmations, but it turns out if you speak kindly about people's bodies who have bodies like yours again and again, you begin to think more kindly about your own body.
I can totally see that.
Yeah, I love that. Well, and sorry.
Go ahead. No, go ahead.
No, I was just going to comment too. It's interesting because I think that is something with my own kids that I've also really been intentional about, of like, I am not going to say anything negative about my body or your body, because like growing up, I think my mom was really careful not to say anything negative about my body because that's what she grew up with, but she would say negative things about her own body all the time.
Yeah.
And I think didn't realize how much I would internalize that. And so, yeah, I think that that's huge, of like, how do you talk about yourself?
Yeah. And I think it's also reflected when you read it. Like, I find when I read books with fat main characters, I think kinder of my body at the end of the day, even kinder than I maybe would have been previously, maybe even earlier that day to myself. I'll leave the book like, no, my little tummy's cute and it's fine,
Yeah. It is.
Yeah.
One of the things too that we wanted to talk about was on body autonomy and stuff with Maria, and how she denies having to lose weight for the show. She's absolutely not. And like having body hair and things like that. It's really interesting to read a book. It sounds weird, but I feel like we don't get that in romance a lot, where it's like, yeah, she's got body hair, who cares? Or, yeah, she's on a show and not going to lose weight. So like, I feel like you talking about this, like, that's very much reflected in Maria as well.
I expected a lot more pushback about the fact that Maria like refuses to shave. Like, I think that it helps that she's Swedish. So I think that some people who might otherwise like might have been a little bit more hesitant are like, Swedes. Europeans,
Those Europeans.
What do you do? But like, it's been one of my goals literally since like I started writing in 2014-15. I have wanted to have a character on the page who like does not shave for since then. And in fact, my first agent, like, I wrote another book that will never be published with a female character who did not shave, and my agent made me take it out. My then agent, no longer my agent. Because she said it's never gonna, no publisher is gonna be willing to pick that up. So I was expecting pushback, and I got none. And I am shocked. As far as I don't read a lot of reviews, particularly like negative reviews, but I haven't seen much commentary on it. Like, I expected people to be more, and I'm happy about that, but because it's not something I'm not sure I have read it in a romance before, where a female character explicitly does not shave. I expected more pushback. I'm glad I didn't get it.
Yeah. I think the timing might be good. I wonder a little bit, because I think over the course of the pandemic, something that I've seen on like TikTok and stuff is there has been a bit of a sort of feminist movement of like, we don't need to shave and wear bras. Like, that's been kind of a thing in the last couple of years. And so I kind of wonder in terms of timing, if this sort of came at a time where people were like, yeah, okay, some people do that.
I've noticed, not in a bad way, obviously, but I've noticed when I'm out and about, more people that actually don't shave. And I'm like, this is exciting. Like, to see. It's weird. And it's like, this is exciting, but it is, because you're like, oh, hey, there's somebody in my town who's not like shaving their legs or pits or whatever. And like, look at them go. And I'm like proud of them, because I would love to, but I'm like I can't. I haven't gotten there yet. I'm not there on my journey. One day.
No, I have the same thought, I feel like. But I love it. I think that's great.
I think the important part to me would be just having the choice and not having to feel bad about either way. If you want to shave your legs, shave your legs. I mean, who cares? But if you don't want to, I mean, you're a human being and we get body hair. I don't know why we should pretend that we don't.
Right. Well, I just thought it was hilarious in the book where they're like, oh yeah, because a Viking woman shipwrecked on an island would be really concerned about hair removal. I was like, that's perfect.
It's so accurate though. It's like, yeah, let's take this fantasy show and they're definitely fully clean shaven. Just that happens.
Yeah.
They really, they're really taking the time to get a knife and like shave down there
Yeah.
in the middle of war.
They're running off to a day spa in like medieval, like desolate island. They're gonna canoe over to the nearest island where there's a day spa.
Yeah. Well, you know what? I love it though, because I do think it's hilarious. I remember when I was like getting ready to get married, or 11 years, half years ago. And some of my friends were like horrified that I wasn't planning on getting waxed. And and they were like, "What? Well, why?" And I was like, "I'll shave my legs, but like like why would I set that standard of expectation like that? No." Like that is not what I know. But it's
once you do it, it's like you can't back out. So.
Right. I'm like, "No, I'm not." So I just think it's funny that like there are people who sort of feel like, "Well, like isn't that what you're supposed to do?" Yeah.
My husband is Swedish. And when we first met, my husband is, I don't know if I should say this, but he doesn't care. He's not shy. Like my husband really loves my upper body. like really. He does not care about my legs. So when I talked to him when we were first dating, and I was not a huge leg shaver to begin with. I just wore I worked at Chloe Williamsburg for a while. We wore long dresses, and stockings up to the knee. It did not matter. So I was like, how do you feel about leg shaving? And he's like, I'm not going to shave my legs. Like, why would you bother shaving yours? And I was like, this is too good to be true. I said, are you sure? He's like, I really do not care. And I tested him. I would go a day longer in between shaves each time. It turns out, yeah, he really doesn't give a fuck. I mean, he does not care at all. At all. And I was so happy. I was like, you are the platonic ideal of the man of my life.
I feel like that's softer than the prickle between shaves. So just let it go. You know?
Yeah. I mean, there was a time back before RWA imploded, the Romance Writers of America, where that was my annual shearing was for RWA because I wore dresses and not all of them were long, and I was like, we set down a sheet.
Oh my gosh, that's amazing! Wow. Oh goodness. So okay, so this I think is in line with something that we've talked about, but talking about the way that you write bodies, what's great about it, and I think something I haven't seen a lot of, is that on the one hand, it's not fetishizing to the fatness, which I think sometimes you get in some kind of odd ways. But it's also not avoiding describing their bodies. They feel specific and realistic, but joyful in their bodies. And so we're wondering too, how do you approach writing? Because I think where you see this a lot, especially, is in sex scenes. So how do you approach that with writing sex scenes that feel real and embodied for these characters, but don't cross that line into being a fetishized thing?
Well, I mean, I think that is something that's important to me, and that's deliberate on my part, because a lot of times in books with bad fat rep, there's a lot of dehumanizing language used. The book that sort of out of spite got me into writing nothing but fat characters referred to one fat character as elephantine, zoo animal, words. I mean,
oh my goodness.
Wow.
There are classic books that are beloved in romance from 10, 20 years ago, where they would use the villain in the piece, they talk about blubber. The villains are often fat. But these are all words that are very loaded with dehumanizing words, animal words, or hairy pig, their villain, another historical romance very famous author. These are things that are dehumanizing, but it, to me, is equally dehumanizing to sort of fetishize fatness, that you only want them because they're fat. And that's also dehumanizing, because you're bringing them down to just a part of their body. And if you're into that, that's great. But that's for erotica. To me, that's for erotica. It is hard for me to believe a romantic relationship with a happily ever after if the person wants you, their desire for you is specifically dependent on your fatness. I mean, what happens if you get sick? Do they not want you anymore? Like my goal is to write characters who, no matter whether you gained weight or lost weight, they would still love you and want you. So yes, that's important to me. In sex scenes, I make sure that it kind of happens. This part I didn't think about as much, but I do try to make sure that the things that they admire about their partner, some of it has to do with, like, it can be that they love the curve, the swell of their tummy, right? But it could also be their eyes. That it's not just body parts that sort of are more associated with fatness. That there are different aspects of them that they love and desire. Some of which have to do with fatness, that can be associated with fatness, like big boobs or whatever, but not all of which are. But it is important to me not to try to sort of elide the reality of fatness. Like, I don't want you suddenly going into the sex scene and suddenly, like, it's a centerfold. A centerfold for, Hustler or whatever. They're like, you want someone who has, it's like the Blueberry River, right?
Yeah.
These things that could be perceived as flaws are not flaws unless you deem them flaws. They are neutral facts about your body, which was sort of how I know that there was some controversy over, like, how Alex thinks about Lauren at the beginning of All the Feels.
Yeah.
For me, he is sort of neutrally describing this is what she looks like.
Yeah.
Doesn't mean that he thinks that, he's saying it doesn't mean that he doesn't like her or desire her. It's just, this is what she looks like neutrally. And then he's not, in fact, he loves birds. And he, you find out later that, like, obviously he desires her, but he never found her undesirable. It's just that he's neutrally describing this is what her body looks like. And that is, to a certain extent, what I try to do in the sex scenes, is to say, just like Lauren's sort of beak-like nose can be something that he can love because it reminds him of, the winter wren or whatever. That stretch marks can be like, like tiger stripes, or like, your stomach, if you have a larger stomach, can be like soft and warm and pillowy. And they're not flaws unless you say they're flaws. Otherwise, they're just facts about your body. And we all have bodies, and all of our bodies are unique. And so I just try to sort of factually work it into a loving sex scene, but, try to describe their body as it exists, but not going in with the presumption that those things are flaws.
Yeah. I love that. I also love with Lauren that she is, like, she doesn't, I guess this is the thing, that, like, she doesn't have to be beautiful to be desirable. And I think that that's so huge. I think sometimes there's this assumption that, like, I don't know, that, like, people have to, I don't like there are people that I might find attractive, for instance, that aren't, like, conventionally good looking, but are still appealing because they, are striking or charismatic or, whatever it is. And so I think that's so nice to see in a heroine, where we have a hero who is into her and sees her for who she is and wants that, but she doesn't have to be this conventionally sort of gorgeous person.
I mean, I think sometimes within Fat Rep, there can be sort of hopefully an unintentional message being sent that a desirable fat person is a fat person who would be beautiful if they lost weight.
Right.
Conventionally beautiful if they lost weight.
Right.
And there are some fat people out there who would be conventionally beautiful if they lost weight, but not all of them. And, like, does that mean that no one can love them? And that no one can desire them, and that they can't have a happily ever after? No. And I think that needs to be reflected on the page too. Not all of us if we lost weight would be like
Mhm.
modeling.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well,
And-
I think you also like incorporate the idea that like attraction is more than like what you visually see on someone.
Yeah.
With Lauren, especially in that, and all the feels. And that's so powerful because I think I see the argument. This is a TikTok thing I see all the time where men are like, no, women just like him because he's muscly. And it's like, no. We're all attracted to the fact that he's like, is like Henry Cavill, like that he's building a PC and playing D&D and is a total nerd. Could care less about the muscles. Like, I didn't blink an eye at that man until like I saw him doing nerdy things. And I was like, oh, you're cute now. But like, you know, sure, he's conventionally attractive, but there's more into that pie than just like you look good or you're hot or whatever you want to call it.
Mm-hmm.
Did you see on Twitter? I think it was from TikTok. There was this dude who's like a one-man band playing, was it the Black Keys? He was playing all the, like, he had it all around him. He was playing all the instruments. And he was not, like, I think he was a bigger guy. He wasn't, like, particularly well-kempt or anything. And it was impressive. And if you looked at the Twitter comments below, there are women who are like, they were panties dropping like everywhere. And he was
because competence.
Right, because
that's a lot.
Competence porn is big for me.
Yeah.
Like when I see someone do something well, like my first ever real significant other, I worked at Colonial Williamsburg and I listened to his tour of the Governor's Palace. And he was so good. He was so good with his group. Like he was very different from me. He was quite a lot quieter, but like he had done his research and the groups would like lean into him. He was very quietly, very charismatic. And I was just like, damn.
Yeah.
And I mean, in that moment, and you know, he was a lot older than I was, I think, you know, but I found him deeply attractive in that moment because he was just really damn good at what he did. And I really admired it.
I love that.
Is that like the nerdiest like attraction story ever? Like
no, I think that
I think it's adorable.
I think it's great. I can relate to things of like finding things like that appealing. Like right before my now husband and I started dating, he's a scientist. He is like, I don't understand half of what he does, honestly. But like I would sit and listen to him try to explain math and physics to me. So yeah, I mean, I think there's something to that.
There is. Yeah. It's well portrayed in all the feels, especially. Yeah. Let's see. Okay. One of the other questions we have is that you have in the spoiler alert series, which my brain is like all of the books. So you have the excerpts. So you have the fan fiction, you do the group text and all that, and like the different transcripts, like and all the things. Do you like doing them? Like, is it something you just really love doing? Because they're really well done.
Yeah.
And often, like, I don't skip them in books because I'm not like a skipper person. Like, I don't skip epilogues and things. But there's something that I will like kind of skim usually. But yours, I'm always like, yes, must read all of this. I need all of the details, all of the info about everyone in the group chat and what's going on in their lives, and just like I need the check-in. And it's always fun and enjoyable. So do you particularly love doing those? Are you just like, what made you want to start doing them and adding them to the series?
You know, at first I thought about doing it as sort of a bonus. When I wrote spoiler alert, you know, some bonus material on my website, but I ended up, I chatted about it with my editor, and we ended up incorporating it within the book, in part because Marcus and April have a backstory of having been sort of beta reader friends, longing for more a little bit, that it's a way to incorporate that backstory without having to do like a ton of, and then 2 years ago,
Yeah.
as you know, Bob, like, it's a way to sort of do that. And specifically in spoiler alert, I will tell you that one of the reasons, so I had a few of them, and then I thought, well, it would just be fun to do different types. But my first contract with Avon was for spoiler alert and all the feels. And my editor put it in my contract that I was contracted to write 2 hilarious rom-coms. Like, not just that they had to be funny, they had to be hilarious. And I wrote my draft of spoiler alert, and there's some heavy themes in there, right?
Yeah.
And I thought, yeah, it's funny, but is it contractually hilarious? I'm not sure. So part of the role in spoiler alert is to add humor.
Mhm.
So you have like Marcus's, and I mean, to answer your other question, I had so much fun writing those. Like Marcus's terrible scripts were just were so fun. I love punny titles,
Mhm.
and I love the cash chats. Those are just great
Yeah.
fun for me. Uh, but it was a way to sort of add some lightness that the
Mhm.
story needed. All the feels is not in spoiler alert. They're between every chapter.
Mhm.
All the feels ran long, so there was no way we could have it between every chapter. But also, I felt like there was enough humor in the story itself
Mhm.
because Alex, I find hilarious.
Yeah.
Yes.
And his interaction with Lauren, their banter,
Mhm.
that I felt like it didn't need as much of that between the chapters.
Mhm.
And I think to a certain extent that it didn't make as much sense with Shipwreck too. There are some, but
Mhm.
Peter does not necessarily have the same sort of acting history as Marcus,
Mhm.
because for Marcus, it was also doing some character work.
Mhm.
Because the point is, he didn't value his own talent enough to like push for better roles. He just like, they want me, I'm gonna play this role, even though I can do, I should be able to get better roles than this.
Yeah.
But that's not going to be the case for Alex or Peter. And so there's only I did get to make up one last terrible TV show in Shipwrecked. Have you, yeah, you've read it. So
I
I
read
won't,
most of it. I have like 100 pages left.
so
So
I won't
almost.
spoil it. There's a
Okay.
reference to it, but it is a
Okay.
sort of a takeoff on Baywatch, which
I cannot wait.
and that was really entertaining to me, and I was glad to sort of revisit that for at least one like reference. So no, it was a lot of fun. I think one of the highlights of my literary career is going to be the snippet from One Wheel Two Reel from Spoiler Alert, where it's the coming of age story of a troubled unicyclist in Portland. And his unicycle, he falls into a unicycle game and like has to get himself out. Like that snippet of the script that I wrote is like one of my towering achievements as a writer.
That's amazing.
It was so good.
This like perfectly dovetails with kind of the next thing we were thinking about is you do such a great job of balancing humor with more serious topics because all of these books have some more weighty material to them, but they're also really funny. And so I did wonder how do you do that? How do you find the right balance with writing them?
I mean, it took me a while in my writing career. One of the areas I think I've grown over time is my willingness to be just nakedly emotional. I think that in my first few books, the stories that are out of print, they have more farce. I do have a weakness for farce. A little more farce, but less sort of emotional weight. And part of that is because I didn't trust that people would want to read my writing if it weren't funny. And I wrote a novella between those two series, between that first series and the Spoiler Alert series, which was about a marriage of convenience for health insurance because she finds a lump on her breast and she needs to get like she's getting a free mammogram, but she needs to get a biopsy. And I was like, this book, it can't. I mean, I'm sure there is an author out there who could make it funny. I wasn't that author, and I didn't actually want it to be funny. That wasn't the story I wanted to tell. I want to tell a tender story, and but a relatively more sort of weighty story. And I got really good. Not very few people read it. It's in one of the sweetest in the Gale, but I mean, I think more people have read it now. But like some of the people who read it really loved it, and they loved most in it. And I thought, well, maybe people would still like my writing, even if there were a chapter or two where there weren't a lot of laughs. As long as they trust that like we will get back to some lighter stuff in the end. So I think that the Spoiler Alert series is really the first series where I sort of went full bore in on sincere emotion. Like I wasn't trying to keep emotional distance to sort of protect myself, be
Mhm.
ironic about it at all. Um, but at the same time, it is a rom-com. I get the sense where I feel like this is reading too heavy, then I will find a way to sort of counterbalance that. In spoiler alert, that was the interstitials between the chapters. I just finished writing a book. I just turned it into my editor 6 days ago. And there are a lot of the female main character is messy. A female main character written. She is angry and she's sad and she is her sort of story in the book is figuring out, and she's depressed, and not like depressed in the sense of like sad, like in the sense that she's depressed and doesn't realize that for some of the book. So, and the male main character is like sort of starchy, solemn. I love him dearly, not like a barrel of monkeys necessarily. So it's like, she's funnier, but she's also depressed. So like, how do I, and I swear the book is good. I love this book. But I was like, how do I make this funnier? And it's not a secret, but like, I was like, you know what? She's going to work part of the time at a bakery. And the baker this surly, crusty, big dude named Carl, who's going to, I think, be the male main character of the second book, is going to listen to monster fucking audiobooks in the back of the bakery because he has, it turns out, a bit of a history with the narrator. So, like, and it gets into the point where Athena, the main character, is trying to get back at the male main character. They're neighbors. And she opens their windows and plays like some of these audiobooks at top volume, so he has to listen to like Sasquatch double penetration. He's trying to like pay his bills at night, and then the neighbors are kind of into it. So they're all story hour, and so I use some of the stuff like that, some of those sort of side stories to sort of add the lightness and the humor, which at the beginning of the book, especially the first bit of the book, is not going to come as much. I mean, hopefully there's still some. I actually think it's quite a funny book, but wanted to make sure that added some levity in the same way the interstitials did. There are no interstitials in this one because it doesn't make sense. It's not about family. But yeah, so I was like, you know what would lighten this? Gargoyle fucking. That's what would.
Okay, but like that feels like real life though at times. Like at the worst times, like you're gonna leave a terrible thing happening and like be cracking up 5 minutes later at the weirdest thing because that's just like how you relieve the stress of it. So like it's perfect.
That's great.
Who was there for me in my darkest hour? It was the shadow creature and his two dicks.
Listen. I love my gargoyles, so I'm here for this.
I mean, I think, I think there's a reason that, monster erotica has taken off in the midst of COVID, right? I mean, like, there is something to that.
Absolutely.
And I read it. Like, I mean, so
yeah.
Poke fun at it, but like, I'm poking fun out of it, not out of sense of mockery, but just because I think it
gets wild is why.
It does. I mean, yeah, I read it too. So it's a lot. There's a lot.
One of the things I love is like, I'm sure that the authors who do this, I'm not against writing it myself someday, but you have to figure out what bonus features will the penises have. Like they all have like bonus features. And I'm like, how do you get what bonus features it'll have? And so like that's one of my ongoing jokes in the book is like it's like how are human dicks supposed to compare to this? Like, they don't vibrate. There's not ridged. There are no spurs.
No. Oh my gosh. But you know what? There is, how did I come across this? I saw somebody posting about it. There are like businesses that sell toys
Mhm.
that are designed to be like that.
Yes.
Oh yeah.
So I mean,
Bethany.
like, you know.
Is it? Yep.
Yeah. Oh my gosh.
I can send you links later.
Yeah, we have gone in quite a church. I know we've been, I feel like we could talk to you all day, but like I know we've had you for a while on this. So yeah. Everybody should go read Shipwrecked, read all of Olivia's books. They're all absolutely amazing. We do want to, before we close out the episode, do On My Radar, where we're going to talk about some recent or upcoming book releases in sci-fi, fantasy, and romance that we're excited about. And Olivia, I don't know if you have anything that you think people should be aware of that you wanted to share. You do not have to, but
Well, I mean, take it with a grain of salt.
okay.
Both, like, I have a lot of friends within the romance community. These are both people who I consider good friends. So, like, no interest undisclosed here. But I genuinely think they're amazing. So, one of them has a book that just came out, and another one has a book in January. So, Therese Bahari is a dear friend of mine, and she had A Ghost in Shining Armor come out, and I grew up reading romances of all sorts, but there used to be Silhouette as well as Harlequin, and occasionally they would have in the category romances, right? Sometimes they would randomly have like paranormal ones, and including one where there was like a ghost hero where there'd be time where he could set things on fire with his eyes. That's legit, like an old Ann Stewart, like he could do that. And it wasn't in a separate line. You would just be like, this one, he's a rancher, and then the next one, like, yes, he sets fires with his mind. And it would just show up, and it was awesome. And there wasn't like a ton of world building to it. Like, it wasn't meant to be. That wasn't what it was. But, like, here we are in this reality. We're like, dude is a ghost. Like, here we go. Like, what does that mean? I love the way Therese did this because it was not. I love world building too, but it doesn't really bother me if it's like, this is the way things are. So now let's deal with the situation as it stands. And her male main character is, I think, if you're a Ghost and Mrs. Muir person, or if you, like me, sort of love the stories like that, I think it's really, really cool. It brings me back to my days of reading about. I'm just trying to think. Yeah, it was Rebecca. Was it Rebecca Flanders? Anyway, it doesn't matter. But they had books like that sometimes. So, and Therese is really unafraid of, sometimes difficult topics. And I love that her books are set in South Africa. She's South African. So that just came out like a week or two ago. And my other dear friend, Emma Berry, has a book coming out, Chick Magnet. And it is a chicken influencer on YouTube named Chick Nick. And she becomes big during the pandemic because everyone's at home, and she's sort of they're like, yes, I have chickens at home. And so she becomes big. And then she's next door to this grumpy Viking-esque veterinarian who's pissed because all these people got chickens who weren't ready to have chickens. And then there were things that went wrong, and he had to deal with the chickens at that point from all these unprepared chicken owners. So she moved next door, and then they meet, and it's funny, but her books are so smart, and they're also they're so thoughtful, and they're realistic in ways that, like, these are not his business is in trouble. Like, main sort of things in there is his veterinary business is like going under, and like he's not a billionaire businessman. Like, her books are always very grounded sort of in realities of various things, and fast. She's one of my favorite writers, period. And she deserves a much larger audience than she's publishing it through Montlake, so through Amazon. Okay. And that's coming out in January, and I can't wait for her to have a much larger audience. Well, both of them, but Emma's been away from writing for longer, and I can't wait for people to read her work.
That's awesome. Cool.
that my proposed title, other than Chick Magnet, was I really desperately wanted her to title it Down to Pluck. But sadly,
If she does a sequel, I feel like it has to be Down to Pluck. Like that just has to.
I actually used that in the book I just wrote because I was like, "You sure you don't need that?" I won't tell you how I used that, but I was
Okay.
like,
I mean,
also,
you should. That's great.
also, this is apparently a theme of mine. One of my alternate titles for spoiler alert,
Mhm.
which my Avon was like, no, was Down to Fic. Or for Fic's sake. And they were like, no, yeah.
You're like, absolutely not.
Like, no, too much. That's so funny. Oh my
That's
god.
funny.
Wow. Awesome. So yeah, go check those out. We've got, and then I know, Izzy, we've got a few.
We
You know, one
do.
coming out November 15th is Before I Let Go by Kennedy Ryan, who I love. And this one is a second chance romance between a divorced couple who are co-parenting their kids, and then things kind of heat up between them again. I'm sure it's gonna be beautiful and heartbreaking and steamy because that's what she does. So
Yeah.
it's a good
It'll
one.
make you cry at some point, right? Like it's mandatory.
I mean, of course.
One of my November 15th ones is Villain I'd Like to F, which is the continuation, the Like to F anthologies. I about called it series. I mean, it is a series, I guess, with various authors. This one has Sierra Simone, Eva Lee, Nicola Davidson, and Joanna Shoup. I'm just excited to see what they do. I've liked this, what I've read of the other anthologies. Like I've read bits and pieces, and I just think they're really fun. And they're great puns. I mean, they're great jokes on the whole like trope for that. And I do like a villain, so
I'm sure they'll be fun. Yes. Also coming out November 15th is Tread of Angels by Rebecca Roanhorse. This is a fantasy novel with about a card sharp with a penchant for trouble who's defending her sister who'd been accused of murdering a member of the ruling class in their mining town. It's a new world of dark fantasy that she's exploring. So I love her books. Excited to see where that goes.
Then we have Pride and Protest on November 15th as well by Nikki Payne. This is an interracial romance. Pride and Prejudice retelling, obviously, from the title, if you didn't piece that together. Oh boy, my mouth just did not want to say her name. Liza is trying to save her neighborhood from the property developers trying to develop it. And Dorsey, the Filipino son who's been adopted into a white family, is like the CEO of the company and thinks she's kind of just a joke in there to like cause fake outrage, and then a meme goes viral and brings some trouble for both of them. So I love the setup of a meme going viral for a climax moment of some kind to throw them together.
Yes. And then the last one I have is November 22nd, Two Wrongs Make a Right by Chloe Leese. This is a modern romance retelling of Much Ado About Nothing, which is maybe one of my favorite plays by Shakespeare. So I'm excited to see what she does with that. It looks like fun. It's got a cute cover.
I read that one. It's excellent. It's
perfect.
They asked me to blurb that one, and I was delighted to blurb that one because it was so good. It was so
good. Oh, that's good to hear. I'm excited. I think it'll be fun.
I'm very excited for that one.
Yay. Well, thank you. Oh, okay. Do you have another
We have one more.
Sorry.
We have one more.
Okay. Like, no, I'm jumping the gun.
You jumped the gun. Wow. I see how it is. No, it's fine. The last one on November 22nd is Astrid Parker Doesn't Fail by Ashley Herring Blake, the sequel to Delilah Green Doesn't Care.
Mm-hmm.
This is based around a renovation show, and I do not like renovation things. Like, I have no interest. But I'm so excited for this because I love Delilah Green so much. And this is about her sister Astrid, who's like career obsessed, very driven, just left her fiance a year ago. And the carpenter who comes in, and it's their rivals to lovers. It's sapphic. I'm pumped. Like, I don't think it's full blown enemies. It doesn't sound like it's full blown enemies, but they definitely don't like each other to some extent and have to like play up their tension for the show. So I'm very excited to see how that plays out.
Yay. Yeah, of course. Excited for that. Well, thank you so much to Olivia for joining us. This was really fun. It's been lovely to get to chat with you. And for everybody, if you enjoy the podcast, we do appreciate if you take a moment to rate and review us so we can continue to reach more listeners. And if you're interested in getting early access to episodes and exclusive bonus content with every episode, consider supporting us on Patreon. Huge thanks to all of our supporting patrons who make what we do possible. I will be back in 2 weeks with Leanna for our discussion of The Wisdom of Crowds by Joe Abercrombie, finishing up our final book in the year-long read-along we've been doing, so join us for that. And this has been Chapter 3 Podcast. We're your hosts, Bethany and Izzy, and you can follow us on Twitter, Instagram, and TikTok at Chapter 3 Podcast, and find us on our individual YouTube channels. The next episode will be available in 2 weeks, and this episode's bonus content will be available to patrons in the next few days. Thanks for listening.
Thank you so much for inviting me. It's been lovely.
Yeah.